accommodate them. We should not change. We have our laws are time tested.
OK, Ahmed, thank you. Just as we move on, before we do, Deputy Prime Minister, it's been reported today that Abu Hamza's family will carry on living in a 1.25 million five-bedroom house at taxpayers' expense, receiving benefits. It's worth pointing out, of course, that some of his children will be there. 4 of his sons and a stepson have served time in jail, 2 for terrorist offences. Is it right that we should be funding this?
Well, look, if they've committed any wrongdoing, if they've broken the law, they should be, charges should be brought against them, much like anybody else. As I said before, I mean, I can hear Ahmed's frustration, but that is not a decision, quite rightly.
No, but coming back to the family, Deputy Prime Minister, here in England.
He's been convicted. He's been convicted. He's now going to serve time in prison. It's not his family. They've not decided to take action against his family. I simply am not close enough to know whether that is something that should or shouldn't happen.
It's frustrating for people, though, isn't it? They see £34,000 a year going into that.
Yeah, and as I say, there's a lot that's frustrating about all of this, not least the very, very long period of time which it took for Abu Hamza to face justice in the first place. It's finally happened. The wheels of justice, frankly, do. That's why you've got all these old-fashioned sayings about it. The wheels of justice do sometimes turn slowly, but justice has, at least in his case, finally been done.
We move on, Mr. Clegg. Next caller.
Charlie. Charlie in Reading. Hello, Charlie.
Charlie in Reading is here. Charlie, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are Very
well, thank you.
Very nice music in the background, Charlie.
That'd be my work phone going off.
That's very soothing.
God knows you need some soothing at the moment, Deputy Prime Minister.
No, I don't. I'm all fine, thank you.
I think we all need a bit of soothing at the moment.
Very
yes,
good.
We do.
Anyway, moving on.
So my question for you, Mr. Clegg, is with respected names from across the sailing world, notably Ben Fogle, who's been fantastic in citing the potential for human error within the search area for the 4 yachtsmen, given such harsh conditions. Can you tell me why it's taken so long for our own emergency services, who I saw this morning were deployed, to respond to the disaster, and why such high-level politicians such as yourself have taken so long to respond to this search?
Well, as you know, the American search and rescue services, according to them, covered an extensive area in the first instance. The weather then deteriorated very significantly. They've now, thankfully, resumed their search. The anguish of the families involved is just, I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine, not knowing what's happened to the loved ones, not knowing what's happened to these 4 men, and their absolute desire to see the search continued and resumed as it now thankfully is. I mean, I think everybody in the country was completely united in understanding that.
I think Charlie's point is why it took so long, though, for Britain to get involved.
Well, no, there were immediate attempts, of course, through diplomatic channels and through the government and so on, to make the case on behalf of the family that everybody would like to see the search and rescue operation resumed. I'm told that the British search and rescue specialists feel that the Americans did what one would expect of the search and rescue services in that situation across such a vast area in the mid-Atlantic in very difficult weather conditions. But what I can't tell you, Stuart, because I just simply don't know, is exactly at what point the initial searches were called off and what the weather conditions were at that particular time. But
Charlie, let's get you back in. Are you happy with what you've heard?
Yeah, I think what I really wanted to answer.
Are you a sailor? Are you a sailor, Charlie?
I'm not a sailor actually, but I've sort of seen Andy sail sort of since a very young age.
Right.
So I've been down and watched him before, and he's a very sort of competent kind of guy. I just really wanted to know what sort of the high-level politicians, such as yourself, Mr. Clegg, have done to sort of ensure that this search was restarted as quickly as possible. Yeah. Well,
as you know, government ministers were immediately dispatched to speak to the search and rescue authorities in the United States. So there was absolutely no doubt at all in the minds of the decision makers on the other side of the Atlantic what this government felt on behalf of the families who quite rightly are in a state of terrible anguish about these 4 missing men. So, we did, I think, what people rightly would expect of the government. There was ministerial involvement in that. I guess where I'm a little bit reticent is I just cannot, from a distance, second-guess the professional judgments of the search and rescue experts themselves, and that's the only bit, if you like, where I'm a little bit reluctant to cast judgment now without knowing precisely what decisions they have to make, often in very difficult circumstances.
Charlie, we'll leave that there. Thank you very much indeed. Just to explain, if it sounds a little bit stilted between myself and the Deputy Prime Minister, there's no tension between us whatsoever. He's about 250 miles north of here, out, of course, canvassing. I understand, Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm, of course, in the studio in London, you're in Manchester, is that correct?
I am.
I wonder if I could put a little question to you about Manchester. If I was to ask you who was the leader of the Lib Dem contingent on Manchester Council, would you have the slightest notion of whom I was speaking?
Of course I would. He's an old friend of mine, Simon Wheel. He's very good guy as well.
What the hell was Ed Miliband doing yesterday when he didn't even know what was going on down at Swindon?
Do you know what, Nick? I don't say this that often, but I actually have a little bit of sort of sneaking sympathy for him. I think it was a little bit harsh for him to know precisely the kind of name and serial number.
Well, you just named the bloke in Manchester off the top of your head.
But look.
By the way, you weren't meant to do that, but do go on.
No, but I so happen to know Simon for and I'm obviously an MP from Sheffield, just the other side of the Pennine. So of course I would. But I don't know.
It's 55
there you go. There you go. See, on the eve of an election poll, even then there is generosity in the way I talk about my opponents.
It's 55 on the Labour target list, and he thought it was a Labour council in Swindon. It's Conservative. That's just a lack of knowledge.
Yes, I do certainly know that we don't control Manchester Council. That's for sure. It's
how much is your weekly shopping bill? Is it more than £80?
I am not going to get. We've been this before. I'm not going to get into the Clegg household bills. Thank you very much.
What I
can tell you is with three ravenous boys. I mean, it's not eating in our household; it's sort of grazing on an industrial scale. It's a lot, but I'm not. I'm just I'm just not going to get into what we pay.
I've got an idea, by the way. I think once this is all over, this campaigning, you and Mr. Miliband and Mr. Cameron need to get together. I think you should start asking questions of the radio interviewers. And
yes. What's your shopping bill? Then,
exactly. I'll tell you my shopping. But things that we should know, like what year was radio invented, so you'd actually catch us out quite. But it's time to turn the tables. Here, lastly, before we go on to our next.
You said it.
Yeah. How jittery were you on Saturday, the FA Cup? You said they were going to walk it.
I was there. My head were in my hands. I was thinking my children are going to be traumatised psychologically by an absolute slaughtering at the hands of Hull. We went 2-0 down in the first 10 minutes. I have to say it made, of course, the victory at the end all the sweeter and all. Yeah. I mean, it was my voice is still slightly harsh. Harsh, not harsh. Sorry, hoarse, not harsh. Hoarse from all of the shouting.
All right, we move on back to the calls. Deputy Prime Minister, where are we going?
Yeah, Bill in Ruislip. Hello, Bill.
Hello, good morning to you both.
Morning.
Mr. Clegg.
Yeah.
What gives you the right to tell me I'm unpatriotic because I wish my country would pull out of the EU? I served 3.5 years in the last war in the army, as many of my family, and thousands of other people have done. And I think that gives us the right to be able to say what we would like our government to do. That's what we vote you for. We vote you in to serve our country. Yeah. And at the moment, none of you are doing it.
OK, I won't cut you off. You're still on the line, but let's hear from Mr. Clegg.
Good point, Bill. Listen, Bill, of course I don't want in any way challenge your right to say what you like, think what you like, vote in the way you like. Of course not. We're a free country, and you have fought for our freedom, and we owe you a massive debt of gratitude. My generation, everybody who enjoys the peace and stability of today has a huge debt of gratitude to your generation. That is absolutely, and I don't question that for one moment. I just want to absolutely celebrate everything that you have done. And all I was saying is I think when people like Nigel Farage claim that they are, and this is where you and I may disagree, Bill, but it's a legitimate disagreement, is where Nigel Farage says that somehow he's standing up for Britain, and he says, he's kind of expressing the great bulldog British spirit of wanting to pull us out of what is the world's largest economy. I think I'm entitled to say, hang on a minute, that is not... Since patriotism is about doing the best for your country, I don't think doing something that I fervently believe means that we will be poorer as a country, there'll be more people out of work, it'll be more difficult to go after criminals across borders, it'll be more difficult to deal with stuff that we have to for our children, our grandchildren's sake, like climate change. I think I'm entitled to say, hang on a minute, it's not a particularly patriotic thing.
Well, that's not quite what you said, Deputy. You said you were guilty of being unpatriotic and betraying Britain.
No, I said people like Nigel Farage who think that it helps Britain to leave the world's largest economy. I said it was a curiously unpatriotic thing to believe. And I think that I just, when people say, like Nigel Farage and other people who believe that we should put out of the European Union, that only they stand up for Britain, it seems to me people like myself, because I'm incredibly proud of being British, are allowed to say, well, hang on a minute, you don't have a monopoly on patriotism. I actually think defending people's jobs, doing what you think is right to protect the prosperity and safety of our country is a patriotic thing to do as well. But I mean, look, but Bill, I mean, not in any way questioning, of course, your amazing service to the country and your right to hold views which are completely different to mine.
Bill?
Yeah, well, what I would like to say also is the fact that Mr. Clegg always comes out with how many jobs we're going to lose in the EU. Do you think all those German car manufacturers, the French and all the others, are going to stop dealing with us? Don't forget.
I think they'll stop investing in here. Yeah, I do, Bill. I do actually think they'll stop investing in here. We're now building more cars, we soon will, in our country than we did since the early 1970s. We're becoming an absolute powerhouse in the manufacturing of cars because if you go up to Sunderland, to Nissan, for instance, they've invested hundreds of millions of pounds. We're churning out cars every few minutes off the factory lines there in Sunderland. And they'll tell you. You don't have to listen to me, Bill. They'll tell you that they invest in Sunderland to produce cars in Britain because we can export them with no taxes, no levies, no fees into the rest of the European Union. If you take that away, then of course there'll be.
Quick response, lastly, line from you on Bill on this, if you would.
Well, I don't believe at all that this would happen because at the moment we export more to them than we do import from them. Okay. And I think that this is just something that to lead us astray, to say we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We've always been a great country, and we always will be.
Here. Let's agree on that point.
Yeah, can I just build on that? There we agree. Of course, we're a great country. I guess my point, where you and I are just going to I just strongly disagree with you, Bill, with this idea that someone we can pull out of the world's largest economy and there's no cost to us. But setting that aside for a minute, I'll tell you what I think. I think one of the things that's always made us great is that we don't turn our backs on the outside world. We don't walk on the other side of the street. We don't just shrug our shoulders and say we don't really care about how to kind of get stuck in and sort things out in the rest of the world alongside our allies in Europe. We've our greatness, the history of our greatness has been precisely because we don't just turn inwards. We don't just put a sort of, to hell with it sign, if you like, on the cliffs of Dover. And I think that is why I think it's such a pity that you have people like Nigel Farage and others saying that somehow it's a good thing for us to turn our backs on the rest of the world, because I just don't believe that's in line with the greatest traditions of Great Britain.
Let's take an email from the top of the pile, if I may, yes. Mr. Clegg. Dan in Hastings. Prince Charles is being criticised for speaking his mind about Putin. Surely he is like Hitler. How fair is this criticism? These are the comments, of course, to a woman during his trip in Canada, Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I'm not really in a position. I don't think I should. In fact, I don't think anyone should try and provide a running commentary on what was clearly considered to be a private conversation. And I think Prince Charles is perfectly entitled to first express views, but certainly express views in the confidence that he's expressing them privately. As for whether you make one comparison or another between one figure today and another figure in history, I mean, all I would say is that I think Putin's sort of menacing behaviour towards the people of Ukraine is not only, of course, very bad for Ukraine. It's not fair on the Ukrainian people, who are going to hold elections this Sunday, which is going to be tremendously important for the future of that country. I also actually think in the long run it's not very good for Russia itself, because Russia depends massively on its ability to, in a stable, straightforward way, export oil and gas to the rest of Europe. And whilst that's not in jeopardy in the immediate term, of course, in the long term, it will be, because if you just have this constant running, destabilising tension between Russia and the rest of Europe, then that, of course, is going to harm Russia's long-term economic interests.
All right, let's go back to the calls. Next caller, Mr.
Your next call is Stuart. Stuart in Hendon. Hello, Stuart.
Oh, good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
The point I'd like to make, we talk about the people who's running off from DCAT prisons.
Yeah.
The problem is the system is flawed. When you go to prison, you have a tariff. You have to serve, say you get a 10-year tariff, you have to serve the whole 10 years. But you must go to a DCAT prison 2 years
An open
before.
prison, right?
You must go to an open prison 2 years before. You've also got, when the people are extremely dangerous, you'll have a AA, A, B, C, DCAT. Some people are so dangerous they cannot even get a CCAT, let alone a DCAT. And if the prison system's run correctly, everyone should be released from a D. What you need to do is have a minimum maximum sentence. And I said to a prison officer friend of mine the other day, the maximum sentence will always be 80 years. And I said to him, why is that? He said, very simple. He said, because you can control people and you're not letting maniacs out into the street. People will not be released till it's completely safe to do so. You're releasing maniacs out onto the street at the moment.
Stuart, just tell me...
You bit a cab driver's ear off because he was moaning about how he was shouting loud in the car.
Stuart, you must listen. Stuart, you must listen to Mr. Clegg. He's trying to respond to you.
No, I just had a question, Stuart, because you obviously looked into this a lot. What's your own experience, your own insight into all of this?
Well, I was actually in there many years ago for a couple of years, so I know the prison system inside out and outside.
Did you go via an open prison before being released? Or?
I did indeed, yes.
Yeah. And what was your experience of the open prison system? Because it's been around since the 1930s. It's as you know as well as I do, Stuart, it's based on this pretty straightforward idea that since no society just locks thousands of people away kind of forever, that the vast majority, I mean, of course, the most dangerous offenders do stay behind bars forever and die behind bars. Yeah. It's a sort of established principle, if you like, that at some point you need to make sure that people's behaviour is changed, they don't commit crime again, and they are readmitted into society. And open prison is a kind of stepping stone towards that, and that's been around, as I say, since the 1930s. But what was your own experience of open prison?
Very, very good. I was in Spring Hill, excellent staff.
Yeah.
The only trouble, there's a lot of pressure on them. They keep cutting down more and more prisoners, putting more and more units in, and cutting down on the staff. It's impossible for them to do their job properly. It's a very short... it's a silly thing to do is cut down on prison staff.
Well, look, Stuart,
stupid. Well, the government moved quickly last night, it has to be said, haven't you, Deputy Prime Minister?
Say it again?
I said the government moved swiftly last night in that prisoners with a history of absconding will no longer be put in open jail. So perhaps you're halfway there, Mr. Clegg.
Well, yeah, exactly. As Chris Grayling has quite rightly said, is that in order to deal with this issue, I mean, thankfully, the levels of absconding, Stuart, notwithstanding these very high-profile examples, not least the ones in South Yorkshire over the last 24 hours or so, actually the levels of absconds are I think amongst the lowest they've been for a long time right now.
It's the type of people, though, isn't it?
But it's the type of people. No, exactly, and that concern is totally legitimate, and I hear what Stuart says, and I feel that concern myself, and that's why I think Chris Grayling's quite right to say, look, if you've got a history of absconding, you're not going to be transferred to these open prisons in the normal way, and you're not going to be released on these kind of day release arrangements that you have. So I think that is a significant tightening up of the system. But I guess my challenge, what I was saying to you, Stuart, was I hear what you say about staffing levels and resourcing. Of course, that's always an issue. But I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say we get rid of the process of seeking to acclimatise people who've been behind bars so that they can then lead a law-abiding life when they get back into society, because actually the biggest problem in our criminal justice system, as you know, Stuart, is there are sky-high rates of reoffending, and the great irony there is, it's one of the great sort of hidden ironies in this whole debate, is that actually that often it's the longer-term offenders with whom the prison governors and others can work the most over years to change their behaviour, to get them to see the error of their ways. Actually, often the problems of reoffending is people who are only in prison for a few weeks, and all that ends up happening is that they end up learning more tricks of the trade from other people who are behind bars, and they come out as even more hardened criminals. And that's the cycle we're trying to break. OK, let's do an email, if I may. Vera in Hinckley, are Pfizer right to walk away from the Astrazeneca deal? Well, They've done it. That's their choice. I've always said that, at the end of the day, it's not for us in government to sort of handpick one company or another. So we're neutral on that, but we're not neutral, and never were, and never will be on the effects of these big decisions as they affect. They were certainly put through the ringer in front of parliamentary committees, weren't they? Yeah, well, I think, look, that's quite right. So you say you didn't have a role to play, but it was certainly a panel of MPs certainly felt they had a role to play. Oh, no, scrutiny. You absolutely. Look, you can't have such a huge... I mean, this would have been the largest takeover of a British company ever. I mean, we're talking, what was it? 60-odd billion. 69.3 billion. Yeah. Huge figures, unimaginable figures. Off the top of my head. Very impressive. Very impressive. That's £80 a week, though, for food bill. But you can't tell me about your food bill, but you can know about the fights. It's odd choice of statistics. All right, we move on. Other calls. Next caller, Jamie in Dartford. Hello, Jamie.
Good morning, Mr. Forey. Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
Hiya. My question to you, Mr. Clegg, in relation to the recent reports in the media of how Ofsted have conducted themselves in the inquiries into the, in particular, the Muslim school in Luton. I want to ask you, do you condone or do you condemn the ability for government-funded strangers to be able to go into schools and undermine the authority of the parental guardianship that I'll be putting my children into when they're in that school?
And just to remind the listeners, this is the Olive Tree Primary School in Luton. It's a Muslim faith primary school where parents said they would take their children out of the school after Ofsted inspectors, and this has not been denied by Ofsted, asked children what they understood by the word gay. They were asked in a separate room without their teacher being present or any of their parents. This caused such a level of fury that, as I say, some parents were ready to take their children away. Ofsted said it's important that they ensure that children are being given a fair and broad spectrum of sexual and religious education matters. Deputy Prime Minister.
Jamie, do you have any personal connections to the Olive Tree Primary School, or...?
Not any personal connections, no, but I'm a parent-to-be, and it just scares me to...
You got small kids at primary school?
No, I've got no children at the moment, but I'm a parent-to-be, and it scares me to put them into a school where that could be that could be an issue.
Yeah. Now listen, I've got small kids myself, two of them at primary school, and I think, like all parents, you want to make sure that as a parent you're comfortable with the school that your kids are going to. And that the teachers and head teachers have got the freedom and the authority to do the right thing by your kids. But I will always support the right of Ofsted on the behalf of the public to inspect schools where there are legitimately held concerns about how the schools are being run. As you know, for instance, Ofsted is playing a big role in looking into this issue of the schools in the Birmingham area, where there is a widespread concern that some of the schools became places where a particular ideology was being promulgated rather than providing an education for the whole community. I don't want to second guess the...
We've got 8-year-olds being asked if they know what gay means.
Look, the bit where
it's not fair, is it?
No, look, the bit where of course I'm not going to pretend that every single Ofsted inspector with every single question in the conduct of every single investigation in every single school of the 1,000 schools across the country always gets it absolutely right. But I guess the decision people like me need to make is the system of having Ofsted with the clout that they do to go into schools where there are legitimate concerns expressed, is that the right thing to have in place? And look, Ofsted is, as you probably know, not a very popular organisation amongst teachers. That I think rightly there are going to be changes now so that Ofsted takes a more light touch approach, particularly to those schools that are doing well, so that good schools aren't constantly being asked to jump through the same inspection hoops. But I have to say, I do think, in the interests of parents, actually, Jamie, like you, it is important that we have some kind of backstop system so that schools are properly inspected, and where things go wrong, they can be held to account.
And when is the baby due, Jamie?
We actually find out the sex tomorrow. It's on September the 29th.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
congratulations.
Can I just suggest, if it's a boy, the name is obvious. It's got to be Nick, hasn't it? I mean, let's face it, it's a done deal, Jamie. Good luck. Love to mum-to-be. Let us know how you get on. Let's move on if we can, Deputy Prime Minister. Try and get at least one more, and on you go if you want, Mr. Clegg.
Sam in Dudley. Hello, Sam.
Hello, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
Hello. I'm just phoning about tomorrow. It's the first time I get to vote in an election, and I'm just wondering what the Liberal Democrats will do for me. I'm a student. I go to Wolverhampton University. I'm 19 years of age, and I've been kind of involved into politics quite a bit. But I'm just wondering what the Liberal Democrats will do with me, and I think it's a little bit of a travesty that we don't often get to see what happens in Brussels, because it's not really, I suppose, that well portrayed in the media.
Yeah. Sam, I think I'd say two things to you. In the local elections, if you look at where the Lib Dems are in majority control, we're the only party to give you and to give everybody in your local area. Actually, no, it wouldn't necessarily apply to it. A council tax free, so people aren't paying through the nose for local services. We run councils really, really well. I think most people in areas where you've got Lib Dem councils are pretty impressed with how hard their councillors work. So that's a sort of record, if you like, of local service, of value for money, which I think is important. And on the Europe stuff, Sam, look, there's a really simple choice for you, and I leave it to you, Sam. But one thing I don't think you can say this time round is that the choice isn't clear, because you've got UKIP on the one hand, who are basically saying, let's pull out of this whole, what is the world's largest economy. You've got Labour saying, as far as I can make out, on Europe precisely nothing. This void, which is extraordinary, given that Labour used to be an internationalist party. You've got the Conservatives doing this hokey-cokey. One day they sort of say they might threaten to leave, and the next day they say they might want to try and stay in. And you've got my party say, look, of course Europe's not perfect. Of course it isn't. Westminster's not perfect. Whitehall's not perfect. But I believe passionately that for the jobs that you, hopefully, Sam, will go to after you graduate from university, you need to have a strong, open economy where we attract investment, where we attract high quality jobs in this footloose, fancy-free, globalised world of ours. And you cannot do that if you basically shut up shop, if you sort of turn the clock back and pull the drawbridge up and say you want to have nothing to do with what is, after all, the world's largest economy. And so I guess my main pitch to you, Sam, is if you care about your own jobs in the future, then I think it's absolutely essential that we remain in the European, yes, reform it, but remain in it. And that's the central pitch that my party's been making over the last several weeks.
Can we sneak one last one in, Deputy
Yes, of course.
Prime Minister, would be so kind? I think it's
Judy in Colchester. Hello, Judy.
Good morning, Nick.
Hello.
I've been invited on to speak about Marks and Spencer's and its problems, and when they are discussed, it tends to usually come to a bit of a joke, which boils down to underwear. But I actually think it's far more worthy of a more in-depth conversation. I know you haven't got much time, but I've done my research. Mark Boland, he's been the CEO since May 2010. It's the lowest profit since 2009.
He's got a busy schedule, Mr. Clegg's got a busy... Can I just move you to the question, Judy?
I'm just so relieved we moved from underpants to Mark Boland in one sense. But
there you
spoilt
go,
my last question.
Sorry?
This man receives a huge amount of money. I listened to his interview yesterday. His arrogance regarding his customers and what we think we want, or what we know we want, beggars belief. He does not listen to the customers, the people that go in there. There are enough ways for him to avail himself of that if he wants to, and he obviously doesn't. And if he doesn't, then Marks and Spencer's will gradually sink lower and lower. He seems to be on a mission. None of the't from shop floor to the top levels are going to get a bonus this year, and people will walk with their feet.
Right. Judy, can I... I mean, as it happens, like you, I think I'm actually a big supporter and regular shopper at Marks and Spencer's. I so happen to know that, unlike you, I've actually admired some of the things that I know Mark Boland's done, for instance, to give opportunities to young people to take up work experience places and internships and apprenticeships at Marks and Spencer's. I don't think it's useful for me as a politician to sort of provide a running commentary on the share price of a particular...
Well, I'm not asking you to.
No, I know. Well, you're inviting me to make a sort of judgment on the current boss of Marks and Spencer's. My own experience has been that on the issue where I've spoken to him about, which is giving youngsters opportunity to work at Marks and Spencer's...
With respect, Mr. Clegg, that isn't what I've asked you. If he's going to offer places for young people, if he doesn't keep his business online, the staff are already not going to get their bonuses.
Have you worked at Marks and Spencer's?
No, I haven't.
No.
But I've grown up with Marks and Spencer's, and like it or like it not, it is a British institution. And it is not what it used to be, and there is so much competition on the high street.
Well, that was the only final point I was going to make, Judy, which is that, the British high street changes all the time. The challenges for Marks and Spencer's now are quite different to what they were 10 years ago. As you know, my understanding is, but I'm not an expert at this, they've done well on, certainly over the last few years, on their sort of food offer to consumers, but less well on clothing, which is a part of the kind of high street which chops and changes very dramatically. But like you, I want to see Marks and Spencer's do well. I'm sure Mark Boland feels the same, and I'm afraid I'm just simply not. I'm simply not going to be drawn into sort of providing what I know you want me to, Judy. But I'm afraid I can't, for what I hope you think is understandable reasons, is provide, if you like, marks out of 10 to one particular boss of one company as opposed to another.
Judy, you and I can talk about Marks and Spencer's in the weeks to come. We must, just before we let the Deputy Prime Minister go, he is, of course, in Manchester, not actually going to Old Trafford to apply for that job, but as part of his campaign.
It's taken.
I know, and you'd have been so good. I think you would have excelled in that. That's when I
My Dutch man, he's a Dutch manager. So,
when I heard that you were going, I thought that's what it was. I thought that's what you were doing in Manchester.
Oh, you flatter me.
What's going to be a good performance tomorrow for the Lib Dems, Deputy Prime Minister?
Just as many Liberal Democrat MEPs and councils as possible.
What number are you working to?
I'm not going to give you a number.
You're not going to give me a running
weekly shop, but you tell me your weekly shop, and then I might.
£250 at Fortnum & Mason solely on foie gras. I'm only kidding because I can say that and you can't.
The secret is out.
Hopefully I see you in London at some point next week.
Next week.
Okay, Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg here on Call Clegg on LBC, where news is next.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. The Deputy Prime Minister has defended on LBC the government's response to 4 British men missing in the Atlantic Ocean. An RAF Hercules left the UK this morning to join the American rescue effort, which has now resumed. Nick Clegg's told LBC they did react quickly.
Ministers were immediately dispatched to speak to the search and